Call this meeting to order, please. If we're all ready to go. Clerk, okay. Thank you for joining us today on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024, the meeting of Community Affairs and Planning Committee. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we're going to read the land acknowledgement. This meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee is being held in a hybrid meeting format with virtual and in-person participation by members of the public, staff, and council. This meeting is also being live streamed and may be viewed online at ajax.ca/live. A friendly reminder to all participants to please use their microphone at all times for the benefit of those participating in council chambers and joining remotely. To those making submissions as part of a public meeting, please ensure you sign in using the sheet available at the accessible lectern to preserve rights available to you under the Planning Act or other applicable legislations. So, the land acknowledgement. We would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. This land is and will be continue to be home to the Indigenous people. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support, truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations toward truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Okay. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest from any members? Seeing none. Adoption of the minutes is the next one for the regular meeting of March 4th, 2024. Do we have any questions? No questions. The adoption of minutes is moved by Councillor Nancy Henry and seconded by Regional Councillor Joanne Dyes. All, please vote. The adoption of minutes. Okay, so next up is item number 4, which is public meetings 4.1, which is the CS 2024-12 2024 dog and cat bylaw. Nicole Cooper is our Deputy Chief Administration Officer and Derek Hannon, our Manager of Bylaw Services. Good afternoon, Mr. Hannon. Always good to see you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, committee, members of staff, members of the public. Today we are going to be discussing the proposed changes to our dog and cat bylaw. We have submitted a very comprehensive report that's contained in your agenda, but we have provided a very brief, quick overview presentation of the changes that we're proposing. As many of you are aware that over the last 30 years, the town has always managed a dog and cat bylaw, which also goes back to our Ajax Pickering and Animal Services days. The last time we did a full review and changes was in 2017. Made a few significant changes at that time, dealing with the waterfront trail and leash lengths, mirroring the provincial standards for pit bulls, and then the ability to collect unpaid vet fines when we've picked up animals that have been injured and required vet change. And then we did some additional housekeeping items. There's a few key changes that we're proposing in this bylaw. The first one being the definition of excessively as it relates to the term barking. The barking requirements is nobody shall knowingly or unknowingly allow their dog to bark or howl. In our definition of excessively, we've defined it currently as 20 minutes. We've received some feedback, as has the Office of the CAO and the Mayor's Office, from residents that believe that our procedures are too lenient. As such, we've done a review and looked at what other municipalities were offering. We've taken that 20 minutes and we've lowered it down to 15 minutes accumulative time with any 1 hour period. Lots of individuals believe, as our former bylaw used to say, that we wouldn't allow it for more than 20 minutes, period. The problem that we were running as an enforcement tool is that no dog barks consistently for 20 minutes. And as such, we were getting charges thrown out of court over and over and over again. That's why when we came forward in 2017, we proposed the 20 minutes within an accumulative hour period. And we've had success in the courts in realizing that that's a standard that is able to use. We do recognize now with the density and the close proximity of neighbors that the 20 minutes is probably more disrupting for most, so we've now introduced a provision involving 15 minutes. Okay. So that's what we're going ahead with now. We've engaged in the public on that as well. The next item that we'll be dealing with is on the definition section. I'll talk about as we go through each of the provisions, but we've changed and included a definition of multi-use path, off-road trails, protective care, and we've changed the definition of shelter as it used to refer to when we were still with the town of Whitby. We've now switched it over to the Humane Society. Section 4.7, we've now introduced multi-use trail and off-road paths. Now that we've allowed off-road e-bikes and e-scooters, kick scooters on our pass systems, we have vehicles going anywhere between 15 and 20 kilometers an hour. Part of that issue is that dogs on extendable leashes can be hazardous, not just for the people utilizing the trails, but also the dogs bolting out in front of somebody. So where we used to restrict only the leash length on the waterfront trails, we've now introduced that to anywhere that the e-bikes and or scooters might be being used, which would now be all multi-use trails and all off-road trails. The requirement for the 1.8 meter leash length is still in play now. We have an issue about dogs, and several complaints have come into the office of the CAO as well about dogs being entered into areas where people would prefer not to see them, such as sports fields, playgrounds, play structures, splash pads. Special events, we're running into some issues, so we've asked now to the ability to create a provision that the town at any time can mount signs saying no dogs beyond this point. If sports fields are being looked after and for whatever reason we don't want dogs on them, currently we don't have any tools to be able to stop that from happening. This provision would allow us to put those signs up, or special events. So we're asking for that provision to be placed in the bylaw now. Again, just more tools that the town can use to help control and protect our assets. The other issue that we're dealing with is about dogs going into areas that we don't want them, such as splash pads and playgrounds. Just this weekend alone, we took 6 complaints from Rotary Park about dogs being on the splash pads, interacting with people and kids. And while I would say the majority of our dogs are friendly and easygoing, a lot of our public are uncomfortable around dogs they don't know, and they shouldn't be interacting with dogs they don't want to while they're playing in a splash pad or a playground. We have constant issues where they see the playground in this structure where dogs are being invited in to climb on the equipment, go down the slides with other kids. We have a lot of cultures that are not dog-friendly cultures. They're nervous and afraid. We need to ensure that we're not creating an issue, so we want to create a buffer that stops the distance in which people can access these grounds. Currently, we don't have a buffer. We're introducing a 2-meter buffer. This will allow. The issue that we were running into is somebody said, what is entry into? Because we didn't have. We would just say nobody would be allowed to bring them into. Well, the question is, what is into? So this provision, we think, will fix that by creating a 2-meter buffer. As an example here, if you do have a waterfront trail or pass system that goes within the 2 meters, they wouldn't be coming off that pass system. They'd be required to stop there. New section we've had to enter into is called protective custody. We're having a real big issue where the town ends up taking ownership, not by our choice, of animals under certain circumstances. And we need to create provisions on what happens if somebody doesn't come forward to pick up those dogs. Now, this is different than strays. When we talk about the protective custody, we're talking about lots of times we're dealing with unsheltered individuals where something has happened medically or criminally where the person has been detained. The dog has nowhere to go. It's the town that's had to step up and take that. Again, this week as well, or sorry, I guess last week, we got called into a residence where somebody had passed away that had cats in the house, and we had to take control of those cats. Right now, we don't believe we're going to have anybody that would come forward to claim them, but we didn't have the legislation in place. This protective custody will allow a process that if somebody hasn't shown up within 5 days, to either take ownership or make arrangements with the town on somebody will take custody of these animals. Eventually, we take ownership after the 5 days, and then we would put the animals into our adoption process and then get them into good homes. The last dog that we've taken into custody ended up that we had it for almost 45 days. It's not a healthy environment for the dog to be in. Humane has asked us as well if this is something we can address through our bylaws. We dealt with our solicitor, and this is the wording that we came up with that we believe is the fair treatment of the animal. And if somebody is working with the town where after during the 5 days somebody says, I can't take custody for 30 days, we have no issue with working with people and making that. We want to reunite pets with their owners. However, we also want to make sure that there's an end date in process to make sure those animals are getting good and proper care. So we started this process in June in 2024 to July 19th. We opened up a public consultation period. We had a virtual in-person and virtual consultation meeting on July 9th. Then July 19th was the last day that we took comments. We've included the comments and the survey result through the IMO page that we created. It's all been part of the report. On August 27th, we released this report and we notified all interested parties that had come forward on the release of this meeting and declared today's meeting a public meeting because we believe there is a strong component of the public that want to speak to this. And today is that public meeting now. And that concludes my brief presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hannan. Are there any questions from members of the public online or from home? Okay, there being none. Are there any members of the public here today in the council chambers that wish to ask a question or speak to this? Asking once.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. At this time, it's the opportunity for members of council to ask questions of staff.
I did it backwards. Okay, we'll move on to members of council for starting with Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hanna, for your report. A couple questions. So 15 minutes in the course of an hour, how is that proved?
So it involves involvement from the people that are being disturbed. Again, the enforcement standard is somebody has to be disturbed. Unfortunately, it's a resident's responsibility to track noise logs, and we walk them through that process. It's no different than the noise logs that we do for our noise bylaw. So residents that are being disturbed would log in and fill out when they're being disturbed and keep those records. When we have enough information, we would proceed with charges to the court.
And same sort of question, a meter and 1.8 meter length leash. Is that a standard length of a leash? I've never measured my leash, so I don't really know.
Through the chair to Regional Council Crawford, that is correct. The standard leash length is 1.8 meters.
And extendable, how far? I guess they can go out to like 5 feet, right?
Most extendable leashes will go anywhere between 12 and 15 feet.
Okay, okay. So it's a standard leash then is what we're basically saying. It can't be any longer.
Correct, and it's a leash length that we also identify in our orders to restrain. It means the owner has good control and it's close to the owner's side.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I have no issue with it. It's a good report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Regional Councillor Sterling Lee.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, and thank you, Mr. Hanna, for the report and the presentation. In terms of accessibility, and let's say someone has an emotional support animal, how much of this bylaw applies to that versus the AODA trumping that?
So, through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, for service dogs and working animals, we don't charge the service fee for the licensing, so we waive that. The issue is if somebody had one of those dogs, they're allowed to go to certain places that our bylaw would not apply. They have rights over everyone else. Working dogs is dealing with CNIB dogs that are trained to be working dogs with security, whatever the case. When we talk about emotional support animals, they have to be recognized through one of the professional development organizations that they need to have a letter. Once they have a letter, they can enter into areas that dogs wouldn't be permitted in as long as they have that letter in place to say that it is an approved use.
Are they also able to have their dog unleashed, hypothetically, in this situation?
Through the chair, no, they would still have to be
There's
leashed.
there's still basic requirements of like leashing and whatnot.
Correct.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you, Chair.
But again, for an example, if we said for Canada Day that we don't want dogs into the event, they would be excluded from that requirement and would be allowed to enter the facility with their animal.
Okay, next up, we have Councillor Lisa Bauer.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hannon, for the report. I do have several questions. Some of them have already been sort of tapped into. To return to the excessive barking, so you talked about residents, the need for them to sort of gather the proof that's needed to move forward. Can you just talk a little bit about, like, how long would that take? What's the actual process? And is it for outdoor barking only, or is it inside dogs too?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So the bylaw would apply to in or out. We have lots of townhouses that the dogs bark constantly and the residents inside their dwelling unit can hear that barking. So the same standards would apply. The information has to come in and the officer to be able to lay a charge has to be satisfied that a likely result in laying a charge, a conviction will be entered. So it wouldn't be one incident. We would have to see a period of time. We would also have to look and say, we've done the education period and we've spoke to them and we've sent out letters advising them what the standards of the bylaw are. It would start the clocks over from that point to start tracking that barking. The other issues we run into is that unfortunately, it would be great if people that we asked to cease and desist certain activities did so immediately, but sometimes it takes some time and some reminders. On the flip side, sometimes they stop for 4 or 5 months and they start up again. So there's no exact, on the third reason will be, or the third occasion we'd be going to court. Sometimes we have to track this and the officer has to review. Other times we bring in our prosecutor to give an opinion as to whether they think we have enough evidence to go forward and the likelihood of a conviction. So there's no simple answer. We have to believe that the barking is unreasonable and it's disturbing the local residents. And once we start to see those bark logs coming in, then the charges should be laid. And typically we would start that with a Part 1 offense, which would be a ticket opportunity that somebody would pay. The next occurrence would be a Part 3 and we would take them to court. Part of the issue is that sometimes it can take quite a while to bring these matters before the courts, which the behaviors are still continuing while we're waiting for those court dates.
Okay, thank you for that. And what would actually be the outcome of a conviction through the courts?
In our world, it would be a fine, and a Part 1 ticket is a $500 fine. A Part 3 offense would probably be a higher fine. But once we're getting into the second and third convictions, we can also get through the Municipal Act an order saying stop the continuation or repetition of an offense. And that would be somebody then would be convicted of disobeying a court order, which carries additional penalties as well, including contempt of court.
Okay, thank you. There was a comment about entering town parkland. So I just want to make sure I understand where no one shall allow or permit a dog to enter onto town parkland unless the encroachment is a result of the town's designed and established multi-use pathway or off-road trail. So I take my dog for a walk and we will often do a route that takes us on the pathway into my neighborhood park. And then we will walk through there and come out the other side. Usually if we have waste, we drop it in there. I don't know if that falls within 2 meters. Is that an example of something that I could continue to do?
Through the chair, absolutely. As long as you're on the pass system, that 2-meter buffer is away from town structures such as playgrounds, splash pads, fountains, whatever the case may be. That's the buffering point. It's not the path. What we're saying is if the path moves within 2 meters of a splash pad, you can stay on the town's pass system as long as it's a designed path. If it's a cut through of worn out grass, that buffer would apply there. It has to be on a town's approved pass system for that 2 meters to be in play.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I noticed in the survey results, there were several comments with concerns about the ability to foster dogs, and that might impact the number of dogs in a household, and I guess cats too, I'm not sure. And also a lot of comments about, can we do something about people who don't put don't poop and scoop or don't put their waste in receptacles. Is there anything in the bylaw that covers any of that or was taken into consideration?
So we always have, and you can see in this, one of the survey questions was about whether we should be increasing, keeping the same, or lowering the amount of dogs and cats per dwelling unit.
Yes.
We actually had this exact conversation back in 2017, and when we brought the bylaw in previous to that. The issue that we run in is if we don't cap the number of dogs and cats, it becomes a nuisance. The animals tend to feed off each other. So when one's barking, it's leading to another barking and another. We looked at and talked about increasing the numbers for sheltering opportunities or fostering opportunities. The problem that we ran into is in one calendar year, 3 of our major incidents that we were dealing with was involving somebody fostering 5 dogs at their house, and it doesn't change the noise. Whether they own the dog or they're fostering the dog, it has the same impact on the community. So at that time, we decided not to increase. I still strongly believe that 3 dogs and 3 cats, especially in the density area of Ajax that we have, the high density, I think those numbers are adequate. And if somebody can't foster with 3 and 3, I think that's probably the dwelling unit shouldn't have the animals in there. Plus, if we have a basement apartment and an upper unit, each unit is permitted to have 3 and 3. So sometimes we're talking about six dogs and six cats per
Right.
property, and then to increase that number anymore, they're basically running a kennel through the house, and that's the negative impact we're having on the community.
For sure. Okay, thank you.
And
So-
then in relation, we do have the provisions now about people. Unfortunately, we probably don't have enough staff to be everywhere we need to be when people aren't picking up, but we
Yeah.
do lay a lot of charges for people not cleaning up excrement, either on town lands and or on their own private property, not cleaning up appropriately. So we have those provisions in our bylaw now, and we continue to have them. The issue is trying to be there at the exact opportunity when it's occurring.
Yeah.
Makes it difficult.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. And so it's the actual number of animals in the home, it's not who owns them. Like if I'm fostering, I don't own that dog.
Correct. It's 3 period, whether you own them or not. It's the amount of legs that are in the property.
Absolutely. Okay, good. And then there was one part, there is no change in the bylaw, but it's part of the bylaw, talking about aggressive dogs or obnoxious dogs and the ability for the enforcement officers to issue orders. So, and it's about an officer may issue an order or instead of will. So I'm just curious how that works because, you know, if a dog were to bite me, I would want something to happen to the owner.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So the staff agree. There's very little tolerance for dogs that are biting people that orders wouldn't be issued. However, we need to have the word may. The officer has to do an investigation. And through that investigation, they have to come to the grounds that finding out that it's reasonable. We find out a 5-year-old has been bitten and will likely have scarred, whatever the case may be. It is horrific that the officers have to deal with that and the families have to deal with that. However, once we investigate and find out, as an example, that kid was at a birthday party and had been told by adults 7 different times to stop hitting the dog in the face with a stick, that's something the officer may do an investigation and say, I don't believe it would be warranted. How many times does this individual need to be told to stop hitting a dog in the face? They need to have the freedom to understand at the end of their investigation that they have multitude of different things that they can do to try and correct the issue. And they need to have the word may lay charges, may decide to order to restrain. It's part of their tools. And then even in the order in which they issue, they have 6 or 7 different items that they can pick and choose to put in an order based on the severity of the attack. No, not always are the complainants happy, and a lot of them want us to do destruction orders and whatever the case may be, but that falls to an enforcement tool, and it's the discretion of the officer that's investigating.
Okay. And last
And then
question.
again, we do have several different orders.
Yeah.
There's the order to restrain, there's the comprehensive order, and then there's the obnoxious order. All of them are still that officers will take into account while they're investigating to decide what the appropriate order would be. And then lastly, we talk about an interim order to restrain. Those interim orders are things that we issue during the course of our investigation to make sure that the animal may be leashed and muzzled at the time during our investigation, but then the officer has 14 days to determine what the final order is going to look like. It's just a temporary measure that they have to issue those orders.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. There's a lot of components to this. Thank you very much. I appreciate the information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Nancy Henry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to read you a question. I know that Councillor Lee asked questions with regards to special needs and service dogs. So this question is a little bit more specific. Are service dogs excluded from the bylaw? And they're giving an example. So I've seen a lady with an autistic child at Kensman Park playing. The boy appears to be an occasional runner. The service dog lays at the edge of the playground watching the boy, and if the boy decides to take off, his caregiver isn't close enough. She gives a command to the service dog. The dog runs through the playground, heads off the boy, and stops him from going any further till she can get to him. So I noticed that you said before that the dog still had to remain leashed. In this particular instance, where the service dog is trained to do such a thing as protect the child from going any further, how would that bylaw affect this situation?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, I think first and foremost, I can't look at every example. In that particular example, I would probably say it's not an emotional support animal. I would probably say that's a working animal. It has been trained to specifically do what it's doing, and working animals are different than emotionally support animals. So in that case, we would allow the exception. The same as if we had a working dog that was doing anything medical related, where having it on a leash may be contradictory to what they've been trained to do for the owner. Obviously, our bylaw wouldn't apply in those cases because they're working, trained, and been raised for that specific purpose. Emotionally support animals are usually ones for comfort. That's the ones that we wouldn't. And I also want to be very clear. They provide great functions, and we also have emotional support chickens and goats, and not just animals, or sorry, not just dogs. But I want to be trained. They're not well trained. Any animal can be designated by the letter written of a doctor, an RN, a psychologist, whatever the case may be. There's no training requirements on emotionally support animals. However, there are on working animals. So in that case you've just given, I would say that's a working animal where portions of our bylaw would not apply.
And what would that look like if an officer appeared on scene and somebody made an accusation against that animal? What would the person who owns the animal have to have on their person aside from, I would imagine the vests are different for a working dog versus a support dog. And what documentation would they'd have to have something on hand to prove that?
So part of it would be part of the investigation. So the officer would gather information while they're there and may require additional follow-up. But somebody who has a working dog has probably got it through a foundation somewhere. There's probably years of training and costs and money that have gone into it. They'll be able to say, refer to this agency, this is where we got this dog from, and we would look into those.
Excellent. Yeah, and I know there's a difference because you can buy a vest anywhere for a dog online and claim that dog is whatever, and that doesn't mean that's the case.
Yep.
Right. So I just wanted to clarify that to make sure that those who needed that type of working dog were supported through this bylaw. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else wanted to ask a question. Just one for myself very quickly. Maybe through you, Mr. Hannon, to the CAO's office, or I don't see anyone from communications. Just wondering, I hear stats, like 65, 70% of the homes in Ajax have a pet. You door knock and you hear dog barking and stuff. So will we be communicating this, all these little nuggets in this new bylaw to the public, like just simple, or something we can request, or I'm asking for the record? I don't know if anybody can
So
speak to
I can speak that everything that happened through the consultation period came through the office of the CAO. The IMO tweets went out. Communications used all their typical communication channels to reach out to gather input from the public.
Okay. All right, that's good. I was just wondering if on the other side of this meeting, if they're going to say, hey, pet owners, we've got new bylaws, check them out, with a link,
Yeah,
something
and
like
we
that.
can do some follow-up, sure.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hannon. I believe we're all done. I need a mover for which is Sterling.
Mr. Chair, just before we proceed, there is a member of the public here who would like to speak to this item as well.
Oh, no problem at all. I thought I had already asked that question. But
Sorry, that was for remote participants, and I had
okay.
interjected.
Okay, sorry. All right. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this? Please come forth and sign in, and you will have 5 minutes once you start speaking. You can turn your microphone on. Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have signed in. My name is Martin Field. I'm from Oshawa. I served 4 years as Vice Chair on the City of Oshawa Animal Care Advisory Committee and chaired their bylaw and regulatory working group. But before I continue, I do apologize coming to you, before you, this late time. I was only made aware of the cat and dog bylaw review a week and a half ago. So if I can continue, I've provided each one of you some examples from the City of Oshawa. And the first one is regulating the commercial sale of cats and dogs. We came before Mr. Hannon looking for that provision approximately 6-7 years ago. And since then, there's been no forward movement on that. But since that meeting, the City of Oshawa and town of Whitby have established restrictions on the sale, excuse me, on the sale of cats, dogs, and rabbits. And this has been supported by the Humane Society of Durham Region in all my advocacy with Clarrington, Oshawa, and Whitby, and with various supporters. And that's had great effect because the sheltering system is simply overloaded, and it has been, and there's no end in sight. And all the rescue groups are experiencing the same dilemma. So I just wanted to bring that item to your attention. The same goes for establishing a TNR program. Myself, along with some other delegates, came before the town approximately 2015, 2016, asking the town to establish a TNR program to address the feral cat population in the town. There are feral cat caretakers in the town who continue to trap and take the cats in for spaying and neutering at their own expense. And since that time, we've successfully had the program established in Clarrington, Oshawa, and Whitby. Additionally, and again, that program's been supported by the Humane Society of Durham Region. Additionally, I've been working with the Kawartha Lakes Humane Society, and 2 years ago, we established the TNR program for the city of Kawartha Lakes. You know, these programs have met with great success, and anyone is welcome to contact certainly the manager of Oshawa Animal Services, who could provide any further information on the success of these provisions, namely the restriction of the sale of cats, dogs, and rabbits in pet stores, and the TNR program. I'd also like to see an extension or an exemption for those who foster, so that you could increase the number of cats and dogs by one animal, because these are temporary animals. They're not owned in the traditional sense. That they're just there on a temporary basis until they're adopted out into a home, a permanent home. The City of Oshawa has got that provision, and I am not aware of any issues stemming from that in terms of disturbance or any other factors. The other provision I'd like to see is tethering. We've had reports continually about dogs being just left on a leash, treated like a piece of garden furniture, if you will. And that is that is a reason why dogs bark, because they're not given the attention, they're not walked. The owner thinks, oh, I just let them out on a tether and that's it. The dog suffers under that situation. The dog is a herd animal. It looks for alpha male or the owner and that relationship not to be abandoned. So I would recommend you look at the tethering provision in that regard. Also, we have provisions for dog houses and dog pens. I think being more prescriptive on that helps the owner, because then they know precisely what they need when they're constructing a pen or a dog house or purchasing. And again, that has been a real help, and that's supported by the OSPCA. There's material on their website about a safe and properly constructed doghouse. As I say, these provisions, you know, they're. I'd like to see the town have more parity, if you will, with adjacent municipalities.
Okay.
And I believe that concludes my what I have to say before you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Well, thank you for for what you've said and the comments and insight you've shared with us today, and for the work you've obviously done for, I imagine, a number of years in our community. So we appreciate that. Your comments and insight have been read into the record. So the timing, as you alluded to, is a little, because there was a timing a little while ago with IMO pages, but that doesn't mean that your comments or insight are falling on deaf ears. So I'm sure all members of council appreciate you taking the time to come here today. I don't see any requests for questions, so thank you so much.
Okay.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, so now I can move ahead, or we can move ahead with the Community Affairs and Planning Resolution, bylaw number CS2-2412, dog and cat bylaw, moved by Regional Councillor Sterling Lee and seconded by Councillor Nancy Henry. If we could have a vote on that, please.
I actually wanted to speak to it.
Oh. I'm sorry, I did not, it doesn't appear on the screen.
There we are.
I did, okay. So the mayor wishes to speak, so you have the floor, sir.
I just, further to the delegation. I
Can't
just
turn
want-
on your mic.
It's on.
Oh.
Just had a question to Mr. Hannon with regards to sale. What is our bylaw, and what are our restrictions, if any, on monitoring sale? And if it's not covered, why is it not covered?
So through the chair to your worship, the Ajax does require licensed pet stores. We also have in town that we mandate anybody who's breeding for the purposes of selling, that they have to be licensed by the town as well. So in those regards, they're both already covered. The issue that we debated several times and continually comes up is if somebody has an accidental litter at their house and they're gonna sell them, that's what people do, and I don't believe they're operating illegal puppy mills. However, in our pet shop bylaw, we only allow one accident every 2 years. So if they have more, they need to take action, because they will get charged under our pet bylaw for not ensuring that these accidents aren't occurring. When they are legal breeders, we license them and we make sure that the care and everything else is in place for those animals. And then we only have one pet store left in town that sells. He's been in business longer than I think a lot of us have lived here. So we don't get complaints over puppy mill puppies coming from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, now, like 3 times I tried to do this. I need a mover, which is moved by Regional Councillor Sterling Lee, seconded by Councillor Nancy Henry on the Community Affairs and Planning Resolution, dog and cat bylaw. Now, could you please vote? Okay, and that passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Next, we have item number 5.1, which is the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan Implementation Strategy, 5-year update by Director Romanowski. I see Mr. Richards, Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change at the podium. So, sir, you have the floor when you're ready, when your mic comes up on my screen, or is it already on? No, you have to turn it on.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Thank you for having me today. My name is Cameron Richardson, and I'm the Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change with the town. And today I'm here to give you a bit of a status update on the 5-year update to our Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan implementation strategy. As a bit of an outline, I'm going to give an overview of some climate change context, both across the province and regionally, describe the difference between planning, climate action in terms of mitigation actions and adaptation actions, give a brief history of the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan, a status update on how the 5-year update is going this year, and then identify some next steps. So to give a bit of a provincial context on climate change impacts, this figure is from the recently released Provincial Climate Change Impact Assessment that was released by the province early last year. So really this assessment looked at the top climate change risks across the province, which are listed there on the left, which include extreme heat and cold, extreme precipitation events, wildfire, and drought. And it really looked at the impacts on certain vulnerabilities across the province. Sorry about that. These vulnerabilities across the province are the same vulnerabilities we have across the region and in the town of Ajax, and those include people and communities, infrastructure, the food and agriculture sector, business and the economy, and of course, the natural environment. When we look more locally at the region of Durham, Durham staff have done climate change modeling projections out to the year 2100. And these projections show that we're going to expect warmer air temperatures on average throughout the year, more extreme heat days, so those are days above 30 degrees Celsius, increasing precipitation, mostly during winter and spring, and more frequent extreme weather events, whether they're extreme rain events or freezing rain or wind. And these risks have impacts across the region. So impacts of climate change, as we all know here, and maybe several of you are dealing with, we're already feeling these impacts across the community. And these climate projections for Durham region indicate that these impacts will become more intense and more severe over the coming decades. So specifically in town of Ajax, we're looking at things in an urban area of extreme heat, localized flooding, power outages, as well as disruptions to transportation. And obviously across the region, some other sectors are being impacted as well. So if we know climate change impacts are already here and we're expected to experience them more severely, what are some actions we can take to deal with climate change? When we talk about climate action, we typically talk about mitigation actions versus adaptation actions. So mitigation actions listed on the left of your screen are really those actions that are trying to avoid future impacts of climate change, so trying to lessen the severity of those impacts. And at a municipal level, we often talk about things like land use planning, active transportation and public transit, changing fleets to zero emission or low emission vehicles, and energy retrofits of existing buildings. So those are all things that mitigate climate action because they reduce emissions. When we talk about adaptation actions, it's really about actions we need to take to prepare for the impacts we're already experiencing and the future impacts that we're pretty certain are coming. So those are often things like emergency planning and response, preparing for extreme events such as extreme heat waves, building our infrastructure to be more resilient to the impacts of climate change, and obviously dealing with shoreline resilience. We're a Lake Ontario community, so shoreline resilience is a big thing we need to improve as well. The items listed in the middle there are kind of in the sweet spot of they are both mitigation actions as well as adaptation actions. And those are things like urban forest initiatives, large-scale restoration and wetland restoration, as well as green and natural infrastructure. So the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan serves as Ajax's corporate and community adaptation plan. So this plan speaks specifically to adaptation actions and does not focus on mitigation efforts. The history of this plan is back in 2013, Ajax released the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. It was really the town's first plan to achieve sustainability across several different sectors. In 2016, Council endorsed the Durham Community Climate Adaptation Plan. In 2018, the town completed 3 vulnerability assessments, and when those were completed, they informed the development and approval of the Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan, as well as the accompanying implementation strategy. The Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan was really a 10-year framework for success where we grouped our strategic action items under strategic focus areas. And those 3 areas were emergency preparedness and response, natural systems, and stormwater, flooding, and erosion. Under those 3 focus areas, we had 8 separate objectives. So this plan was really objectives oriented, and we identified 51 separate action items in the short, mid, and long term to achieve these 8 objectives. Now, you may be asking yourself, if we have a 10-year Ajax Climate Risk and Resiliency Plan, why are we undertaking the 5-year update to the implementation strategy? Well, that 5-year update was actually identified within the Risk and Resiliency Plan, and really it's intended to respond to, number one, the rapid pace of climate change across the region and locally within town of Ajax. It's intended to do an update to address any new emerging issues that may come up, and obviously within the last couple of years, we've noticed some new emerging issues, namely poor air quality due to wildfire smoke that we're feeling in the GTA in town of Ajax. And as well as we need to update every 5 years to address the changing needs of the Ajax community. So to undertake this 5-year update, we divided the work plan into kind of 5 overlapping phases. The first phase was to complete some background research and analysis and literature review to really look at, since 2019, since our plan was approved, what new information has emerged that can help us update our plan now in 2024. Using that research and analysis really informed our first round of public consultation and feedback through a community survey. At the same time, in phase 2, we released a 5-year progress report that's included in your agenda as an attachment today. Phase 3 will focus and target stakeholder consultation with our partners and stakeholder groups, namely organizations like the Region of Durham, our partner conservation authorities, utility companies, and environmental organizations. Once we get all of that targeted stakeholder consultation, we can then evaluate and refine what we're hearing from those groups and provide updated and proposed action items as part of our final report that should be expected later this year to council. So as part of our early work on this 5-year update, phase 1 looked at a background research and analysis, and we're really seeing this, what I call this new policy landscape since 2019. So since 2019, we've had some very significant strategies and technical reports released at all different levels of government. So namely, the federal government's National Adaptation Strategy for building resilient communities across the country. The province released their first ever provincial climate change impact assessment early last year. And then even internally at Town of Ajax, we've released some very significant technical reports and management plans in the last 5 years that can really inform this update. So namely, the Urban Forest Technical Report, our Shoreline Hazard and Erosion Mitigation Reports, as well as our Corporate Asset Management Plan, among many others. The 5-year progress report that was released really serves to provide an update on the progress towards achieving the plan's vision, and that vision is to limit climate-related risk and improve community resilience. This report provides a status update on all of the actions under each of the 8 objectives. So the report identifies under each objective how we, out of 51 total actions, so far have completed 20 actions. We have 17 completed and ongoing, 5 currently in progress, and 9 not started. The 5-year progress report also highlights significant projects that have been completed since 2019. And some of those projects include large-scale restoration efforts, our ongoing engagement with the community, such as our annual Ajax Green Living Days and Ajax SNAP, our private tree planting initiatives like the Leaf Backyard Tree Planting Program, our shoreline hazard management work, as well as some resilient infrastructure work such as the Rotary Park Boardwalk. As part of this early phase of stakeholder engagement, we completed a community survey to gather feedback from residents, but also those who visit Ajax or work within Ajax but may not be residents. We received a total of 141 responses to this survey, which is much higher than expected because it was not a short survey. It took at least 15 to 20 minutes to complete. It was very comprehensive, so that we had 141 residents take their time to do this survey was great. Through the survey, which we have a report within your agenda today that summarizes in detail all of the information we heard from that survey, 56% of respondents are very concerned about future impacts of climate change in Ajax, with an additional 26% being somewhat concerned. So more than 3/4 of the community concerned about climate change in Ajax. We gathered information about what their top concerns are, and we actually used questions from the survey that was launched in 2019 to see how perceptions of risks and real risks have changed since 2019. So we're seeing top concerns are still things like urban flooding and green spaces, which were top concerns in 2019. What we're seeing now and what's changed since 2019 is that top concerns are almost exclusively extreme heat, extreme wind, and poor air quality, which is new for Ajax. It's not something that was identified at the top of lists of concern back in 2019. So these risks really are leading to some real impacts that our residents are feeling, things like power outages, localized flooding, and damage to roads and buildings, both public and private, that are really becoming the top concern for our residents. So taking all of that information, our background research, and our early community feedback, as well as the progress to date, we've created these priority action areas that we want to address in our 5-year update. And they really are those extreme heat and wind, poor air quality, and urban flooding. Under those priority actions, we have certain objectives that we want to address and that we've heard from stakeholders and the public, and those are listed here, namely to limit exposure to poor air quality that results from climate change-driven events such as wildfires, limit the frequency of power outages associated with extreme weather events, and those are namely wind and freezing rain. And we don't want to just focus on limiting the frequency of power outages. We also want to increase individual preparedness for power outage events. We want to continue to improve the resiliency of our community buildings and infrastructure. We want to improve both community and individual level preparedness and response, specifically to extreme heat events, so those long duration heat events that we've been experiencing. And we want to continue to mitigate and adapt to climate change impacts through restoration and urban forest initiatives. So as part of our next steps, taking all those priority action areas and objectives, we will now identify and propose new action items, or propose that we may amend existing action items within our implementation strategy to be included in the updated implementation strategy. We have already started to undertake targeted stakeholder consultation with our partner organizations such as the Region of Durham, other local area municipalities, our partner CAs, utilities, environmental organizations, and community leaders. And those results and all of the proposed updates to the implementation strategy will come back to Council for approval later this year. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson, for your insight and into this. I see some members of council here for questions, starting with Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your report. Can you tell me, since we've started this, how are we doing? Have we achieved? Are we where we should be?
Through the chair to you, Regional Councillor, I think we're doing a really good job at implementing the existing implementation strategy for our risk and resiliency plan. We're over halfway completed and ongoing with our action items, and there are a few larger ones remaining, but we still have 5 years left of the plan to achieve those. We've undertaken in the last 5 years some significant projects. These aren't just simple, updates to the website for education purposes or producing fact sheets for education events, which we've done. Some of these action items are, for instance, one was to implement a stormwater fee and credit program, which took years to do, but that's a significant project that is kind of the envy of other local area municipalities across Ontario, because we're seeing the impacts of urban flooding in the GTA and definitely this summer. So some of these projects, large-scale restoration, the urban forest technical study, are massive year-long or longer projects. So we're implementing significant projects to improve our resiliency. We know that we'll have to continue to have that progress because we can see these more extreme heat events, larger rainfalls and snowfalls that we need to address and be prepared for. So in terms of our municipalities of our size and across Ontario, I think we're well on our way to achieving the objectives of the plan, and we'll continue to do that moving forward.
So there was an article that was kind of going around social media around Ajax being one of the, if not the highest risk for flooding. Did you see that?
I did see that article where it identified Ajax as one of the most prone, actually I believe the most prone city to flooding in Ontario. I did have a few issues with that, namely that it came from an insurance company and directed people to sign up for insurance plans. However, I mean, flooding is a real concern, and we're seeing it's top of mind. We're seeing major flooding events in Mississauga and Toronto just recently. So we do have more flood-prone areas that, through a more scientific method than that article, have been identified with our partner conservation authorities. So we have increased outreach and engagement for those. We have site-specific flood response plans for those areas as well. So in the event of even a minor flooding to a major flooding, we can respond to those appropriately. And I think we've done some major wetland restoration projects within the last couple of years that address stormwater flooding within the town of Ajax. So flooding in urban areas, especially areas that have aging infrastructure and stormwater infrastructure, it's always going to be a concern, and there's always areas that are prone to flooding. There are also areas that are not prone to flooding that can have sewer backups, storm sewer flooding at any time. So we want to address that and make sure everyone's prepared, not just those that live in flood-prone areas.
Yeah, the sites in Brampton and Toronto over the summer were really unbelievable what we were seeing. So contrary to the comments, we are aware of it, we have a plan, and we know where they are.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Regional Councillor Sterling Lee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Richardson, for the presentation and report. Just very quickly, residents kind of responded saying that they'd love some sort of, resoundingly, they were saying the best way to they want to be notified of like an extreme weather event is through the emergency kind of alerts. What is the feasibility of eventually tapping into that system to alert residents of massive floodings or flood risks? I think we got one for a tornado this summer, and then obviously the Amber Alerts, but does the town have any access to that system, and is that something we can deploy going forward?
Through the chair to you, Regional Councillor Lee, yes, it's something that Alert Ready is something the town has access to, so it's more localized than a provincial warning system. I believe the main contact for that is the fire department as well as the CAO, who could release any information on Alert Ready and give that approval. So it'd be more localized if there's an imminent flooding risk. That can be sent out through Alert Ready, and all municipalities within Durham Region use that system. But it is led through our fire department to release those messages.
Who makes the call, though? So, I mean, let's say the fire department deploys it, but would you be the one who ultimately is the arbiter of this one is worthy of a flood alert?
Myself, no. It would be with consultations with the fire departments across the region, as well as any emergency management office staff, namely through the region of Durham, but also local emergency management staff who would look at that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
And sorry, I'll just add that we do have flood notifications that come through our Conservation Authority partners. So they give early warning if they see a weather system that could lead to localized flooding, and then they can upgrade that warning if and when flooding becomes apparent in those areas.
How fast can they feasibly respond, though? Like, for example, Canada's Wonderland is a good example. The parking lot was flooded to the end, right? Like, would the conservation have told Vaughan broadcast it out? Like, that turnaround, is it enough time to really warn residents?
Yes, it's real-time monitoring. It can happen immediately. The importance is the early phases of, it's a flood warning, that the weather is right, that we could receive flooding in certain areas. So it's the early warning, but it's real-time monitoring. It can be upgraded in real time.
Okay, appreciate the answers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I believe Regional Councilor Dies was ahead. She was next, but I inadvertently shut her mic off. So we're going to go to Regional Councilor Joanne Dice.
Thank you, and thank you very, very much for the update on the plan. You've done a great deal of work on it, and it's good to have that reminder of what we have to know and how things are changing so rapidly in a 5-year span. I'm quite amazed by the comments that you received from the public, which were really very interesting as to what their top concerns were. And we are in an area, yes, that floods, and that's one of the concerns I have. As you go closer to the lake, of course, you're coming downhill from the moraine, you're going to get all the water. So it is a problem, and I'm wondering with the flooding, there's things within our outreach with our constituents that we can do and our residents, and one of those is to ask that anybody who has those, catch basins, those for water runoff on their street in front of their house, to make sure it's clear. Because I go by them all the time and they're full of garbage and they're full of leaves and they're full of weeds, which means when you have a downpour, a huge downpour, that water can't get down there. So is that going to be part of an outreach plan as well, those types of hints that we need to get out there?
Through the chair to you, Regional Councillor. That's correct. We often have different messages on how to improve an individual's response to flooding. So whether it's basement flooding and making sure you're storing anything valuable above ground on shelving. So, little steps you can take at home, clearing catch basins, downspouts, those are all part of the messaging that we push out there. On a larger community level, we're looking at using stormwater fee funding to look at stormwater capacity analysis, so we know where there's certain areas that may not have the capacity or limited capacity to deal with those large storm events in the future that we are predicting. So it's just ongoing messaging that we're using throughout the year, especially as we're approaching fall and leaves will be blocking those storm sewer grates. It's always something that we need to address.
And we're always willing, I'm willing to support you in any way possible. We put out newsletters, every few months, and I think those messages are great to have to remind people all the time. The concerns with power outages, everybody recognized that there's a problem with power outages in the community. Are we working with a lexicon to address this? Particularly, there are areas that have poles in between backyard fences where trees are, and that area goes down quite a bit. Nothing seems to be happening to upgrade that old system.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something somewhat out of the hands of municipalities in that we don't manage those utilities systems. We're seeing, and specifically in certain areas of Ajax, where a lot of those utilities are above ground, they're more prone to damage, freezing rain, falling tree limbs. So some of these residents are frequently without power for, a few hours up to several days. So it's something we're looking at addressing, and how, as a municipality, can we address that, whether it's through better tree maintenance on private property, what can we do to help out? So that's something we'll be looking at, and we've already started consulting with in terms of our new proposed actions for the implementation strategy. So we can bring that back when this report comes back later in the year and let you know what action items will address that.
That would be great, thank you. And the only other question I have is when we had a power outage that lasted a few days, it was evident that some of our high-rises were not prepared, particularly the seniors' high-rises, where there's only a backup generator to allow a half hour of lighting on the staircase. And this went on for days. Some of those people had to go out and get food, but couldn't walk all the way up to their apartment and ended up sleeping in a common area on a cement floor. And so how can we assist them in accessing funding or find out a way where we can access or help them get a generator so that we can avoid these kinds of instances? I know they can walk to the community center or wherever, but it's very difficult for seniors. It's about the comfort level too.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know a lot of new buildings are looking at ways to have at least, 3 days worth of backup power, whether it's generated and stored in batteries that are in a battery bank within the building, or they have some sort of generator on site that can fuel the entire building. That's something that we've looked at upgrading at even our facilities, bringing backup generators into code, switching them from diesel to natural gas so that they're more reliant, things like that. It is costly, so trying to help these private buildings to look for streams of funding for large retrofits is something that we often look at, funding streams that are released by different levels of government and promote those to private businesses if they can apply for them.
Well, I think as not-for-profits, in particular with seniors housing, we need to do something.
Yeah.
There's nowhere for them to move on later on. Yeah, there's no long-term care home, there's no retirement homes available. And they're independent living, which is what you want. As long as you can do that, it's perfect. So I think it's really, really very important to the community. We have 3 in Ward 3.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely
there's
within
a large population there.
a growing aging population that the percentage of people that live alone is very high in Ajax. So they're more vulnerable to these climate change risks than someone that's in a detached home with currently working and is younger. So not just more vulnerable to power outages, but more vulnerable to extreme heat events, extreme cold events, all of those things. So all of those vulnerabilities feed into how we respond to those impacts.
And those older buildings won't have air conditioning, so a generator would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councilor Lisa Bauer.
Thank you, Chair Rob Tyler.
Questions?
Good afternoon, Mr. Richardson. Thank you very much for the presentation. Most of my questions have been asked. I congratulate you and your team. Very impressive work. It's hard work, and it's just, I'm so amazed with what you're able to accomplish. So thank you very much. There is concern about educating the public or just spreading that awareness. And I noticed, like in the report, you talk about the emergency preparation website, information on flooding and extreme weather, information on extreme heat. And I don't know that there's an answer to this question, but how do we get that info out so that, because people just aren't aware of it?
Yeah, through the chair to you, Councillor Bauer. It is difficult because we're relying on so many different streams of communication tools. We use the usual ones at Town of Ajax through our communications department, which may be online newsletters, social media, but not everybody's on those social media platforms or checking their email regularly. So there's different things we have to do to address that. My team's done a great job this year of attending different pop-up events, the mini markets, music in the square, just with a booth to talk about climate change, the programs we have, answer questions when people come up. And we're getting, hundreds of people coming to these booths throughout the summer just to chat and talk about what they can do at home. The Ajax SNAP program is also something that allows us to try a different way of reaching these individuals. We're doing home visits with those who sign up so that we can go and talk to them about what they can do at home for energy retrofits, building climate resilience, anything they can do on their properties. And we're seeing huge success with implementation after doing those consultations in person. So we try and do every different way we can think of, and we rely on our experts within communications department to really help us with that. But it's not just climate projects, but we even heard in the earlier presentation, it's hard to get the news out there to everybody on these systems, but we have to keep trying, and we try new methods and different avenues to try and reach new demographics, new people that aren't already tapped into our online newsletter or our social media platforms.
Absolutely, thank you. And the SNAP program that's been very, very successful, I know it has expanded in Ward 3. Does it make any sense at a future time or at all that would be expanded throughout other areas of the town?
Yes, it does make sense. It's targeted towards older neighborhoods. I know that the town of Whitby is actually starting their first SNAP neighborhood this year in Whitby. So it's a possibility that it can be expanded across the town. Right now, we have expanded the borders of where we offer the program in Ajax based on feedback we received last year. So we do cover quite a large area of Ajax. And having said that, the events we run, the information we provide, it's for others across Ajax as well. It's not just specific to Ajax SNAP residents, it's those who use it, who visit parks within that area, who visit the library, the hospital, go to school in that area. So we can reach other residents that way. They don't have to specifically live within the SNAP boundary.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks
Thank you.
so much. And for the second time, Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford.
I just had a thought. When we had a gas pipe burst, I can't remember, a couple years ago now. One of the things that I had asked staff, because people were searching for information and they couldn't figure it out, come to our website, couldn't see anything, is there's an alert page that can go up as soon as you go onto the website, and it'll immediately be the first thing that you look at. And I'm wondering, kind of along the lines of what Sterling is talking about with the emergency, if we also could have that pop up if we think that there's going to be extreme weather. I realize we have no comms here, but I'm just wondering, because a lot of times if people are looking for information, the first place that they'll go to is the website. And why not utilize it, just so that it's right in your face. You don't have to search for it. It's I can't remember what it's called, like an emergency page that just pops up. So I don't know, maybe that's a thought that we could use, maybe even in not so many extreme cases where you would need to have fire involved, but more of an alert system, because I think, the last few rain that we have, I don't think Ajax was really affected too badly. Yeah, very lucky. But at the same time, having an alert system like that ready to go, I think is important, because they do go to the website to find out, kind of firsthand what's happening. And there's nothing more frustrating than trying to find it and then get mad, right? So it's better just to be, if it's right there as soon as you go on. Anyways, just a thought. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea, and I believe we did something like that during COVID restrictions, where it provided all of that information right on the homepage, a banner up top. So definitely something staff can bring back and speak to communication staff about.
All right, excellent. Mr. Richardson, I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your presentation. Moved by Regional Councillor Joanne Dyes and seconded by Councillor Lisa Bauer, that the report entitled Ajax Climate Risk and Resilient Plan Implementation Strategy 5-Year Update to be received for information. Did I miss something? And that council authorizes staff to proceed with stakeholder consultation on the proposed priority action areas. If we could please vote. And that carries. Excellent. Next, we have the Community Affairs and Planning Resolution for adjournment, that the September 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee be adjourned, moved by Councillor Lisa Bauer and seconded by Regional Councillor Sterling Lee. All in favor, please vote. I declared that, I declare that resolution. Sterling voted no. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. See you next time.